You only need to worry about getting a trademark once you've made it. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. To straight up myth bust this, there seems to be a misconception that you only need to get a trademark once you're successful, once you've launched your business, once you're global, once you're a big brand. Whereas the reality is a trademark can actually protect you as a small business or as a startup from the big brands and from the likes of copycats. So if people are trying to steal your identity or imitate your identity, whether it's your brand, your logo, or even something you're actually trying to create, which we'll go into further details in the takeaways. I've seen quite a few horror stories in my time of businesses launching or going to market and not having a trademark or not even checking if someone else already has that name or that logo. To give you one example, one of my favorite brands is Monzo, which actually was originally called Mondo. And they had this beautiful go-to-market strategy and a lot of people signed up for their waitlist before they even launched. And after they launched, they actually had to do a whole rebrand of their name from Mondo to Monzo because Mondo was already registered. And I believe it was one of the locations they were planning to go into geographically. Another one more recently is there is a activewear that I follow on Instagram and Facebook called Bloggalates. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but she designs a lot of activewear and it's quite different. And she's thought through the details of how she's designed the activewear, not like the likes of Lululemon or anything where it's mainstream. It's very niche. And she designed this tutu skirt and sent it to Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift had worn it in one of her videos. And then some of the big brands like Shein had actually imitated that skirt to try and sell it. So she's been having ongoing court cases and legal battles with these big brands because they've essentially stolen her patent and trying to pass it off as theirs. Luckily, she has the patent and luckily she has all the trademarks around it from a long time ago. But it just goes to show that actually with your trademark, it can help you against some of these big brands. And then from personal experience, I actually have 2 trademarks under my belt. So for those of you that don't know, the first one is my name is actually trademarked. So that's from 2018. And then more recently, I did a trademark for my digital agency, It Just So Happens, for a product called Dreamgineer that we're going to be launching later this month. I actually got the trademark in way before we even started doing the proper build on the product, because I wanted to make sure that we were going to be covered and that we could scale and we would be able to have global access and also future proofing for anything we want to do with that product. As always, let's go through vocab. The first one being trademark. So this is a legally registered symbol, word or phrase that identifies and protects a brand. TM, so you may see a tiny little TM next to names. This actually indicates that it's been claimed. So someone may be in the process of going through a trademark submission or they're planning to do a trademark submission and they would use this TM to identify it's unique for them, that they're claiming the rights to it. Whereas R, so the little R you see next to a name, is actually registered trademark. So this is a legal classification, registered trademark. You can actually look it up online and see what they're registered for. But the R means it is a registered trademark. They own that. IP, intellectual property. So sometimes people confuse IP with trademark. So IP is around the creations of your mind. So this might be things like inventions, designs, names, artistic work. These can also be legally protected, but it's different to a trademark. And you may hear the phrase of people saying our IP. So for example, at It Just So Happens, we have processes and ways of doing things that we say it's our IP. So we've designed a process that our clients can use, but it's ours. Copyright, again, not to be confused with a trademark. This is legal protection for original works and authorization. So this is normally around writing, art, design, music. Again, people may want to use a song on social platforms and they think they can just use any song, but actually there'll be copyright licenses around songs of as and when you can use it. Again, different to a trademark. Infringement. So this is the unauthorized use of a trademark or other protected IP. WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. So this is a global body that facilitates international IP and trademark registration. So if you ever need to check a trademark, regardless of what country it's in and registered to, it will come up on the WIPO. And finally, classes. This is actually the categories that trademarks are registered under. Number one, what trademarks do. So as I mentioned in the misconception about the protection, a trademark is your legal protection and ownership of a brand or a logo, an asset. The common types of things that you would trademark is what's called a word mark. So this may be a name, for example, Dreamgineer. Another one may be a logo. So this may be a visual design that you've actually created for a logo. Now, you may have a name within a logo, but there's a difference between a word mark versus a logo. That would be classified as a combination mark because you want to trademark the name on the word and the logo. Other things are sound marks. So, you know, Netflix's da-da. I'm not doing a good impression of it, but they've actually trademarked that sound. The other things are colors and shapes. So the Tiffany blue, the Coca-Cola bottle, those are all things that can be trademarked. As I mentioned in the vocab around classes, so there's different classifications of categories of what you want to register your trademark in. And this can vary from things like services to products to franchising, and it's worth consulting with a legal advisor or doing your research to actually understand the different classifications that you need, because whatever classification you don't have, the class, the category, means that if someone then use your name, trademark, logo, whatever it is, and it's not in your category, you actually have no legal ownership around that. Also to mention on this, depending on your categories that your trademark is in, depends on what legal stand you have against certain things. Again, a lot of people think, oh, because I have a trademark, then I'm entitled to that social handle because that's my name, or that's my business name, or that domain. Now, yes, you may have a case or situation to claim that domain name or that social handle if someone else has it, but depending on the class you have for your trademark, it may not stand up. The other thing to mention with trademarks, especially if you're in a crowded market or you're a new business entering that market, by having a trademark, it's this way of showing and differentiating you from other competitors in the market. You're not a fake business. You're not trying to copycat someone else. You've actually gone down the legal route to trademark what you're doing. And customers recognize that TM and that R, and they know what it means. Number two, when to register a trademark. So as I mentioned, obviously the example with Monzo and also my personal experience where I've registered a trademark before we've launched the product, the best time to actually get a trademark is before you do all your marketing spend and go to market. If you're not wanting to do your trademark just yet, at least do your homework and understand if anyone is already using that name, that logo, that bottle shape, whatever it is, because then you're setting yourself up for less disaster in the future. Can you imagine you've done something, you've gone to market, and then you want to expand into other markets and you can't because someone already owns that name and they could take you to court? If you are considering a trademark, or if you have a product or service that you believe is really unique that you want to trademark it, I would suggest to do it before you go to market. And the reality is submitting a trademark takes about 3 to 6 months. This can obviously vary depending on if you're using a lawyer or doing it yourself. And obviously it depends on your continent, country and region. So for example, for the UK, I submit the trademarks to the UK IPO. In Europe, they've got a European IPO. And in the USA, I believe they actually have to submit trademarks depending on the state they're in. So it differs by state. So it's worth, again, doing your research, finding out the information that you need and part of that process. Once you actually submit your trademark, a real human actually verifies your submission. So they would then check, has anything been registered under this name, brand, logo, similar situation, classes, are there going to be any disputes? And they would confirm to you whether you can actually go through that process. Then once it's actually been filed, there's a period where people can dispute your trademark. So again, this is when you want to do it before you launch, because you don't want your eyeballs on your name before you've actually launched your product or service, because then people can dispute it before you even have the trademark. Then once that period is over, which on average is about 12 weeks, then it actually gets filed in a register and makes it legal. So then you get a trademark number, you get a filing date, you get all your official paperwork, and then you can use your R in the circle. Now, just to loop back round on classes of your trademark, when you're filing your trademark, and again, this is from learnt experience, think about every eventuality in the future of what you might want to do with that name, logo, product, service, whatever it is, of any other class you would potentially need in the future. Because trust me, it is way more cost effective to do it in one go. So for example, in the UK, I believe, and I will check this and put it in the notes, it's 150 to submit for a trademark, and then it's £50 per class that you add on, which doesn't seem like a lot. But if you want to add on another class at a later stage, you can't. You would have to do a whole nother submission of the £150 to add on other classes. The other thing is your trademark is valid for 10 years, and at every 10 years you would need to renew it. So if you submitted a trademark today in 2025 and then you want to add on some other classes in a few years' time, your trademark dates are going to be out of sync, and that would just frustrate me. So it is worth thinking of every situation and scenario you may want for a trademark and just submit it now all in one go. The other thing I suppose that's a smaller misconception is people think you have to be an established business to submit for a trademark. That is not true. As a sole trader, you can submit for a trademark. So you don't need to have a PLC, LTD listed on the stock exchange. As a sole trader, you can submit for a trademark. And finally, number 3, why it's worthwhile having a trademark. I hope I've really kind of covered those off in takeaway 1 and 2, but just to mention, obviously having a trademark protects your brand or protects your logo, protects your product or service. So if anyone's trying to imitate you or be a copycat, you have that registered legal protection. The other thing is, once you have a registered trademark, you actually get notifications of any people that are submitting trademarks too closely related to you. So whether it's your name or your logo and similar categories, you get notified and you have the ability to then dispute theirs, as I mentioned in that process when people can dispute trademarks. So it gives you that heads up warning that someone's trying to imitate you if they're legally trying to imitate you. The other thing is, once you register a trademark in said country, whether it's your home country or whether it's your business country, whatever it is, you can then do it on the global scale. So for example, I've got trademarks registered in the UK, and now it makes it a lot easier in theory to do trademarks for the UAE or for Europe or for China or for the US, because I already have that established trademark. There's actually a grace period, I believe, if you submit a new trademark and then you add on other countries after. I think they can backdate it for a few months. Again, I will verify this and add it into the show notes. Another benefit of having a trademark, if you do have any disputes with these digital channels, so whether it is a domain or it's a social handle like Google or Meta or whatever, again, having a trademark is another form of legal documentation to show the ownership around that name or around that brand or around that product and service, which is really interesting because in the EU at the moment there is a discussion about one of the countries, which I will link the article to, allowing you to trademark your face, and that is to prevent AI imitations of your face. I just think it's fascinating. And it shows you where things are going around that ownership of your brand and your assets, even down to your face. And then, of course, other benefits. Obviously, be proud of your trademark. Use your R. It shows that you trust your brand, your product, your service. You've registered a trademark. Also then from entering global markets, again, that ownership around a registered trademark, it just increases your brand reputation from such a small little R. Which to mention, I see a lot of people using the small TM on products and services, especially people on Instagram who are influencers or coaches or whatever it is, to claim that they've developed that name, which is fine. Obviously use the TM, but it almost gets to a point where if you haven't registered your trademark 2-3 years on, don't use it. It looks silly and people know then you haven't actually gone through the process and registered it. So do you actually own that process or that product? Just register it as a trademark. As a wrap up, you shouldn't wait until you're an established business and company to get a trademark. The best time to do it is when you're a small business or when you're a startup, because it will help protect you as you grow, as you scale, and against the big businesses. Take this as your sign. If you are ever considering to register a trademark, do it today. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive with your host Taelon, and see you next week.